What makes a showdown truly unforgettable? Is it the silence before the first shot, or the weight of everything unspoken? Westerns have long defined justice under the scorching sun, where two figures face off in broad daylight with nothing but honor, revenge, or redemption at stake. Today we revisit the 22nd most legendary high noon duels ever filmed. Saddle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's step into the heat of cinematic justice. High noon. When Marshal Will Kane locks eyes with death on a dusty Hadleyville street, time itself becomes a weapon. The town clock ticks mercilessly toward noon as Kane, newly married and freshly retired, stands utterly alone. His old enemy, Frank Miller, is arriving on the train, and no one, friends, deputies, townsfolk, will help him. The cowardice of a once loyal town crushes harder than any bullet. Shot in real time, High Noon transforms a simple standoff into a moral battlefield. Every ticking second mounts tension, every footstep echoes betrayal. Gary Cooper's restrained performance turns Kane into a symbol of lonely justice. When the gunfire erupts, it's brief and unsparing. No glory, just survival. This isn't just a gunfight, it's a crisis of integrity played out under a blazing midday sun. And when it ends, Kane throws down his badge in silent contempt. The showdown doesn't just reveal who's brave, it reveals who's human. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no dusty Main Street here, just a sprawling, sun-bleached graveyard echoing with tension. The final duel among Blondie, Tuco, and Angel Eyes is more than a gunfight. It's a cinematic symphony of greed, betrayal, and patience. As Ennio Morricone's haunting score, The Ecstasy of Gold, rises, Sergio Leone stretches time to near madness. Close-ups lock on twitching fingers and darting eyes. The world disappears except for these three men and their unspoken grudges. Then silence, a crow's call, and in a flash, it's over. Angel Eyes is dead, Tuco's gun is empty, and Blondie walks into the horizon, whistling. This standoff isn't just remembered, it's burned into pop culture's DNA. It redefined how suspense could be staged in film, trading rapid action for emotional overload. The high noon moment becomes art, fusing music, visuals, and performance into an unforgettable slow-burn climax. Leone didn't just direct a Western, he composed one. Shane. When a mysterious drifter named Shane walks into a saloon to face hired killer Jack Wilson, the silence is suffocating. Wilson, dressed in black and dripping venom, has already gunned down an innocent man in the rain. The town is paralyzed. But Shane, a reluctant hero with a haunted past, knows what must be done. Their showdown is swift, inevitable, and devastating. As Shane steps forward, every eye watches, especially young Joey, who idolizes him. The gunshots are thunderous, their echoes drowning out the stunned gasps. Shane prevails, but he's wounded, not just in flesh, but in soul. There's no living with a killing, he tells the boy. The showdown isn't about who's the fastest draw, it's about who carries the heaviest burden. The high noon shootout becomes Shane's farewell to innocence, to peace, to ever belonging. Riding off wounded into the mountains, he becomes legend. The duel may be over, but the emotional aftermath lingers, casting a long shadow over the American myth of the lone gunman. The Wild Bunch. No other standoff ends with such glorious, violent finality. When Pike Bishop and his aging outlaws march into Mapache's compound under the brutal sun, they know it's suicide. They've seen the West die before their eyes, replaced by machine guns, corruption, and soulless power. But in this moment, they choose to go out not as relics, but as warriors. With a nod, they draw. The bullets fly, bodies fall, and blood paints the dust. Peckinpah's direction is operatic, turning the showdown into a chaotic ballet of slow-motion death. It's not about winning, it's about legacy. These men die for each other, for a code the world no longer honors. It's not a traditional high noon duel, but the spirit is the same. Face your fate in broad daylight on your own terms. And when the dust settles, silence reigns. The showdown is over. But the Wild Bunch? They've become legend. For a few dollars more. The clock ticks. A haunting chime plays from a pocket watch. Time is more than a motif, it's a weapon. Colonel Mortimer confronts the sadistic outlaw Indio in a field bathed in golden sun. Years ago, Indio murdered Mortimer's sister. Now, vengeance rides on a musical cue. As the melody ends, Mortimer calmly outdraws Indio. Justice, long delayed, arrives like thunder. Sergio Leone's mastery shines here. The emotional build-up, the precision framing, and Morricone's music elevate the moment into myth. But it's not just revenge, it's catharsis. Clint Eastwood's character, the quiet gunslinger, steps aside to let Mortimer finish the job. The duel becomes a passing of judgment, a cleansing fire. It's a high-noon showdown with a heart full of ghosts, and its resolution feels like a prayer answered at gunpoint. Leone knew how to make silence scream, and when the gun goes off, the audience exhales at last. 3:10 to Yuma. Dan Evans isn't a lawman, he's a struggling rancher. But when he agrees to escort outlaw Ben Wade to the 3:10 train, he steps into a moral furnace. Under a blazing Arizona sun, Evans waits in a hotel room as Wade's gang encircles the town. Fear whispers from every window. Townsfolk urge him to back down. Even Wade, calm and cunning, tempts him with bribes. But Evans stands tall. As the train whistle echoes, the standoff begins. Wade's men close in. Evans pushes forward, dodging bullets, dragging the outlaw toward justice. The station looms, the hour strikes, and in a moment of clarity, Wade, impressed by Evans's bravery, boards the train willingly. This isn't a shootout about kill counts. It's about courage in the face of death. High noon becomes a test of moral endurance. Evans isn't the fastest gun, but he's the bravest heart. And that's what makes the showdown unforgettable. The Magnificent Seven. They weren't supposed to care. Hired guns, drifting men, bound by pay, not principle. But when Calvera's bandits return to ravage a poor Mexican village, the seven stay. As the sun rises over adobe walls, the final showdown begins. Dust swirls, horses scream, bullets fly. Yulbrenner's Chris leads with stoic calm, each member fighting not just for survival, but for redemption. Chico's fury, Vin's charm, and Harry's sacrifice shape the battle's heart. The villagers, inspired, join the fray. It's not just a gunfight, it's a rebirth. With each death, honor is reclaimed. The sun blazes overhead as tombstones rise in the dirt. The final moment is bittersweet. Only a few survive, and Chris reminds them, only the farmers won. We lost, yet their choice to stay gave the town its future. The showdown isn't just legendary for its action, it's revered for its soul. When the gunfire ends, you feel it in your bones. Tombstone. O.K. Corral. The name alone pulses with Western legend. When Wyatt Earp and his brothers, along with Doc Holliday, stride through the streets of Tombstone under the noon sun, destiny waits at the end of the street. The Clanton gang is waiting, armed and arrogant. Then, with a drawl and a dare, "I'm your Huckleberry." Doc sets the tone for what's coming. The shootout explodes in close quarters, lead flying, boots stomping, and chaos reigning. It's less than 30 seconds of screen time, but every moment is etched in cinematic history. Wyatt stands defiant, brothers fall, and justice, or something like it, is carved in gunpowder. The sun doesn't set after this showdown. It scorches the memory. Tombstone took an old legend and turned it into operatic justice. The high noon vibe pulses throughout, men facing their fate without flinching. In the end, it's not about who shot first. It's about who stood last, and why. Once upon a time in the West. Silence hangs like a noose. Frank, the ruthless killer, steps into the bright light, eyes shadowed by a black hat. Across from him stands Harmonica, the man he can't quite place, but fears all the same. Leone stretches time like taffy. The wind howls across the barren landscape. Flashbacks invade the silence. a boy forced to watch his brother die, hanging beneath the scorching sun. That boy is Harmonica. The truth lands like a bullet before a single shot is fired. And then, bang, Frank falls. The final showdown is as much psychological as physical. Leone's camera dances between faces, memories, and fate. This isn't just vengeance, it's poetic justice played out under the eye of a merciless sun. The midday light strips everything bare. No words, no mercy, just resolution. With Frank dead, Harmonica rides off, his past finally buried. It's a standoff for the ages, where time, trauma, and truth converge. Unforgiven. William Money isn't the man he once was, or so he wants to believe. A former killer turned farmer, he's dragged back into violence after the murder of a prostitute. The final confrontation happens not in the street, but inside a saloon. Money, soaked by rain, steps into the lamplight and faces Sheriff Little Bill and his deputies. The silence is deafening. "Any man don't want to get killed, better clear on out the back," he growls. The showdown isn't flashy. It's terrifying. A few brutal seconds, and the lawmen are dead. Money doesn't revel in it. He doesn't smile. This isn't justice. It's reckoning. In a Western world where the line between hero and villain blurs, Money stands at high noon in spirit, if not in light. The past he tried to bury roars back to life, one bullet at a time. Unforgiven strips the myth from the Western, but leaves its emotional truth intact. Open range. The moment Boss Spearman and Charlie Waite step into that town, it's personal. Their friend has been killed, their cattle destroyed, and under the harsh light of day, justice will no longer wait. What follows is one of the most realistic and viscerally powerful shootouts in modern westerns. There's no epic music, no stylized dueling, just sudden violence, booming gunshots, and the weight of retribution. Kevin Costner's Charlie opens the standoff with a shocking headshot, immediately announcing that this isn't a game, it's a war. The town watches in stunned silence as bullets tear through the street and buildings. No one's safe. Every shot lands with a thud of purpose. The midday light doesn't glorify the violence, it exposes it. When the smoke clears, the tyrant Denton Baxter is gone, and the town breathes free again. But the cost is high. Open range reminds us that high noon moments don't need trumpets. They need truth. The man who shot Liberty Valance. It's the most iconic lie in Western history. Ransom Stoddard, a bookish lawyer, is believed to have killed the outlaw Liberty Valance in a classic high noon shootout. But the truth? Hidden beneath decades of myth. When the duel happens, it's the same ritual, the empty street, the townspeople peeking from windows, the villain grinning with a gun. But Ransom's shot is shaky, almost impossible. Valance falls. The crowd cheers, but it wasn't Ransom's bullet, it was Tom Doniphan's, fired from the shadows. A man who loved the same woman and gave up everything so that law, not guns, would rule the land. The Showdown is a masterclass in misdirection and legacy. It questions whether myths serve a purpose when they build nations. The high noon drama plays out as it always does, quick, brutal, symbolic, but its meaning grows deeper with each passing scene. And when the truth is revealed, the newspaper editor says it all. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. Gunfight at the OK Corral. There's no Western image more enduring than the legendary shootout at the OK Corral. In John Sturgis's 1957 retelling, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday face the Clanton gang in a noontime duel that reverberates through Western folklore. The dust of Tombstone hangs heavy, and the silence before the first gunshot stretches to eternity. Burt Lancaster's Earp is a man of quiet strength, while Kirk Douglas brings a fevered charm to Doc Holliday, coughing through his illness and spitting death with every bullet. The gunfight itself is loud, chaotic, and incredibly cinematic. It's not just a battle between men, it's a battle for the soul of the frontier. The sun glares down as the law clashes with lawlessness in a perfectly choreographed explosion of violence. When the final shot is fired, the West has taken a step toward civilization, but not without cost. The high noon standoff here isn't just real, it's ritual, etched in legend and shadowed in gunsmoke. Rio Bravo, Sheriff John T. Chance doesn't have the luxury of time. With a notorious outlaw's brother trying to break him out of jail, Chance, played with effortless cool by John Wayne, must hold down the fort with a ragtag crew of allies. The final showdown comes as the Texas sun blazes overhead. Burdett's gang thinks the sheriff's outmatched. They're wrong. With clever traps, surprise dynamite, and sheer willpower, Chance turns the tables. The showdown isn't just about shooting straight, it's about holding the line when no one else will. The streets are quiet, tension palpable, and the sheriff's moral compass is unshakable. It's not a glamorous gunfight, but a gritty, hard-earned victory. Rio Bravo doesn't just deliver a showdown, it celebrates resilience, loyalty, and the unbreakable spirit of those who stand against chaos. The light of day exposes every fear, but also every truth. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. They were once friends. Now they are ghosts to each other. When Pat Garrett finally corners Billy the Kid in a dimly lit room, it isn't under the noon sun, but the emotional stakes feel like they've been baking there for years. Garrett, now a lawman, and Billy, the wild-hearted outlaw, stare down the past as much as each other. There's no triumphant music, only Bob Dylan's mournful ballads and the suffocating weight of inevitability. The gunshot is quiet, almost ashamed of itself. But it kills more than Billy. It kills an era. Peckinpah crafts this showdown not with spectacle, but sorrow. Billy's death isn't heroic or glamorous, it's a whisper of what the West used to be. Pat's face afterward tells us everything. This wasn't victory. This was loss wrapped in a badge. The high noon spirit still lingers here, but it's aged, broken, and filled with regret. The Shootist. J.B. Books is dying, not of gunfire, but of cancer. In John Wayne's final screen performance, life and fiction blur, an old gunslinger facing one last showdown with dignity. As the clock ticks toward noon, Books arranges a deadly meeting in a saloon with three younger, reckless gunmen. He knows they'll come gunning for the legend, and he plans to meet them, head-on, upright, and on his own terms. The gunfight that follows is sudden, brutal, and unceremonious. No grand speeches, just smoke, shattered glass, and a swift, decisive end. But Books doesn't survive it. His final act is one of control, a man dictating the terms of his own death, facing the sun without blinking. The Shootist is less about the glamour of the draw and more about the fading of an age. The high noon light here doesn't promise glory, it reveals mortality. And in that light, Wayne walks off into cinematic eternity. Ride the High Country. Two aging former lawmen, Steve Judd and Gil Westrom, are hired to transport gold through dangerous mountain terrain. But by the time they reach the final stretch, old loyalties are tested and ideals are on the line. When Judd realizes Gil plans to steal the gold, he chooses the hard road, stand for honor, no matter the cost. As a final standoff with outlaws looms, Judd's battered body and noble heart are bathed in mountain sunlight. It's not a crowded gunfight, just a lonely man making his last stand in open terrain beneath a wide blue sky. The high noon moment arrives as Judd is fatally wounded but dies with peace in his soul, knowing he did what was right. The film is a quiet elegy to a vanishing West, a tribute to personal code over personal gain. In the sunlight of that final stand, we see what true greatness looks like: dignity in death, clarity in action, and the last spark of old-world honor. El Dorado. A sun-drenched town, a hired gun with a conscience, and an old sheriff battling alcoholism. El Dorado crafts its high noon energy with humor, camaraderie, and sudden violence. John Wayne plays Cole Thornton, a seasoned gunman who returns to help an old friend, Sheriff J.P. Hara, defend the town against a greedy land baron. As the final showdown draws near, Cole and Hara, hobbling, bleeding but determined, march down the street like relics from another era. The midday heat seems to bake the tension into every frame. The shootout that follows is messy, chaotic, and surprisingly human. People get hurt, mistakes are made, but the good guys hold the line. What elevates this standoff is the bond between the characters. It's not about who's faster, but who's loyal. The high noon tradition is honored with grit and a wink. In El Dorado, courage doesn't look perfect. It looks real. My Darling Clementine. Long before most modern westerns, John Ford gave us one of the earliest and most poetic depictions of the OK Corral showdown. Henry Fonda's Wyatt Earp isn't a gunslinger for glory. He's a lawman grieving a brother and trying to restore peace to Tombstone. The showdown unfolds slowly, methodically, under the harsh sun and in near silence. There's no musical score guiding emotions, just boots crunching dirt and the thunder of sudden gunfire. Ford's framing, Earp's silhouette against the morning sky, the rhythm of breath before a bullet, is nothing short of mythic. The duel with the Clanton gang is both art and justice, vengeance and restraint. When the last shot echoes and the dust settles, it's not a celebration. It's a funeral for what the West was and might never be again. The high noon theme pulses through every shot, a time of judgment, of reckoning, where men face each other and themselves in the light of day. Duel in the sun, nicknamed Lust in the Dust for its heated passion and tragedy, Duel in the Sun isn't your typical high noon western, but its climax burns with the same explosive power. Pearl Chavez, a woman torn between two brothers, good-hearted Jesse and the dangerous Lute, finally confronts the violent lover who has controlled and tormented her. The final showdown unfolds in the desert under a merciless sun as Pearl and Lute meet not in anger, but in fatal attraction. They aim their guns at each other, words of love spill out. Then bullets. Both are mortally wounded, collapsing into each other's arms. There's no winner, just dust, blood, and the remnants of a doomed romance. The high noon setting here becomes psychological, sunlight exposing the madness of obsession and the fatalism of doomed love. It's Romeo and Juliet, baked under western skies, and it lingers like heat off desert stone. The big country. Not all showdowns are fought with guns. Sometimes the most brutal battles are fought with fists, pride, and principles. In the big country, James McKay, played by Gregory Peck, is a refined Easterner thrust into the lawless wilds of the American frontier. He's mocked as soft, especially by Buck Hennessy, the wild, brutish son of a local rancher. But when Buck pushes too far, McKay challenges him, not with bullets, but with bare fists. The two men square off at high noon, in the open sun, with nothing but the vast prairie as witness. The fight is long, punishing, and silent, an endurance trial more than a brawl. McKay wins not by overpowering Buck, but by refusing to give up. In that moment, he proves his worth without ever lowering himself to violence's ugliest extremes. The scene is a metaphor for restraint, for principle over rage. Under the relentless sun, it's not just Buck who's broken. It's the myth that only brutality earns respect in the West. This showdown is unforgettable precisely because it dares to be different. The high noon spotlight here reveals not just strength, but character. Pale Rider. They call him Preacher. A ghostly figure in a clerical collar who rides into a mining town oppressed by a ruthless land baron. He barely speaks, but his presence is thunderous. Clint Eastwood channels myth and menace in Pale Rider, culminating in a blistering high noon showdown that feels biblical in scope. When Preacher finally acts, it's swift and silent. One by one, he eliminates the hired guns terrorizing the town, appearing from shadows, disappearing into smoke. The sun blazes down, yet his vengeance feels ice cold. It's not a typical duel. It's a reckoning. Every bullet fired seems to carry judgment. The final confrontation with the sadistic Marshal Stockburn is chilling. As Stockburn stares into Preacher's eyes, he realizes this isn't their first meeting. Preacher was left for dead years ago, but he didn't die. He's come back under the bright light of day to settle old scores. When it's over, Preacher vanishes into the hills like a spirit whose mission is complete. The showdown in Pale Rider isn't about survival. It's about divine justice, wrapped in dust and thunder, a high noon moment where the West meets its shadow. From dusty streets to forgotten deserts, these high noon showdowns didn't just define the Western, they redefined storytelling. Courage, vengeance, and moral reckoning burned brightest at midday. Which duel hit you the hardest? Drop your favorite in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic Hollywood journeys into the heart of legend.